Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being part of this, wonderful conversation that I have been looking forward to for a while. What a year 2022 has been. It started with the Great Resignation, and the very first quarter of 2022, it brought on one of the most significant employee-favored job market phases that the world has ever seen, which then in people function teams specifically kickstarted conversations about candidate ghosting, acute talent shortages, employee retention, and brought on also a greater focus on hybrid working. But as the year draws to a close, this great big job boom that we saw for the past 2 years appears to have, it appears to be over. And there are global fears about a recession. So the biggest question on everybody's mind, normally as the year draws close, everyone wonders about what the next year holds. But I think in a more realistic way, we are all, not only from our career points of view, but also from the economy point of view, are worried about what 2023 holds in store. So discuss these points, we have today with us a panel of esteemed people function professionals who head HR functions at some of the most notable organizations of our times. It is my great honor and privilege to actually have this conversation with them. And I would like to introduce all of you alphabetically to our speakers today. Geetanjali Swami, who heads people function and legal teams at Dunso. Narayan, HR and people leader at Mintical. And Mr. Mahesh Gera, group CHRO at Rustomjee. Mahesh sir, welcome to all of you, and Mahesh sir, congratulations. I know Rustomjee got listed in the markets today. I hope you had a very good listing. And good evening to every one of you attending today.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for the delay. I think you talked about a percentage of professionals in the...
Mahesh sir, you are not audible, unfortunately.
Oh, is it?
Okay. Yes, it got a little better in terms of...
Okay, is this better now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay. I again got scared. I thought you were talking about a percentage of professionals who are HR in the audience. I said it was at least by virtue of being the percentage in the panel was also going down by virtue of technology not being with me. So thank you very much. That was really warm, Sowmya, and thanks to all the blessings and good wishes. Our listing, yes, took place and is in green. So we are happy about that. Thank you so much. Over to you, yeah.
Wonderful. Narayan, I know that big things are happening with Mintical on both sides of the ocean. I can see Mintical in the news quite a bit. And Dunso, what a stellar time to be Dunso, especially in the last 3 years. I think it is the household name for most Indians, at least in an urban setup. Great. So I would like to kickstart our conversation. And before we begin, I would like to actually, not the ground rules, but I would like to lay about a couple of points regarding the session. The session, as it was already marketed, it's going to be a total of 120 minutes. Up until 5:30 today, we will be having a conversation with our panelists where I will be fronting the question to Geetanjali, Narayan and Mahesh sir. And post the end of 5:30 onwards, we will be addressing the questions that have come in from the audience. The audience is allowed to type in your questions in the chat section at any given point in time during the conversation. If any of the questions are specific and pertaining to the point that is being discussed and it's relevant, I will probably pick it up and ask them a further follow-up question right then and there. Otherwise, all the questions will be answered towards the end of our conversation at 5:30. Between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, we will be taking audience questions. Okay, we will be taking audience questions at that particular point. That is about it. And I think now we will actually head on to our conversation. So, of course, like what the original context of this conversation, 2022 started with being a job seekers market. But as we wind down the year...
I think someone, people should go on mute. It looks like there's a lot of background noise.
That phone has gone away from the room while we were talking. Okay, so 2022 started with being a job seekers market. But as we wind down with the year, there is, considering that there are recessionary concerns, and there is no denying, there are jobs being cut and, employees are being rolled back to the office spaces. Conversations are happening again about tightening of the payroll and everything else. all of this is to meet with, what is happening, the contraction in the general economy itself. I would like our speakers today to address the very first question, which would be, how is the market actually looking, and what does the employment market per se look like in the year 2023? And Narayan, I think I would start this question directly with you first, because you have a view of not just a business that is hugely in India, you have an equivalent number of employees in the US market too, being Mindtical being a company which has huge employee basis in both sides. I will ask you to address this question first.
See, I think let me divide the question into important parts. One, in any given markets, there is going to be opportunities for people who are capable, who are talented, who have the right kind of skills and aptitude to learn and grow, and that market is always going to be open. Now, considering from the era of skill fungibility to capability fungibility, I think there are two distinct ways of looking at it. So in both these contexts, I feel from skill to capability fungibility, I believe people who have enough and good capabilities are always in demand, and there is going to be still a good amount of opportunities, not only in India, across the world. As we see, Europe is hiring considerably, and South America is hiring considerably talent from India. And if you see, just for the audience, and if you want to do a little bit of a quick research, you can go to LinkedIn and see how many people have relocated from India to Europe or from US to India. You will get a good amount of data to really see the opportunities across the world for capable people. So that's one side of it. There is always going to be opportunities for capable people. Now, coming back to the second important part of the question is in the current phase, which we are currently in, organizations are still going to go through, make their own amends and adjustments for bringing financially savvy, so that they can bounce back as and when need and required. So in that context, capable people would be let go. And then even non-performing employees would let go, from their current opportunities employment, and then it's an opportunity for them to resurrect and then be resilient and find another opportunity and move on. So, like I said, it's not a market of great resignations where people were resigning, finding greater pastures, and getting 100-200% salary increases. It's a market for good, capable people, who have established their brand for themselves. They will still find opportunities to become successful.
Perfect, Narayan. So I think we've started off on a more positive note in terms of what's happening with the economy at large itself. Especially with firing being so much in the news. Geetanjali, I will pivot to you. You have an organization that grew leaps and bounds. Especially COVID proved to be a boon for a company like tons of most internet heavy companies went large during that window. From your point of view, considering there is a contraction in the economy, and of course, what's happening with the market at large, what are your opinions about what kind of a job market exists today, and what is the future going to look like in 2023?
So from our perspective, I think we are a slightly more cautious market at this point in time. Yes, I agree with what Narayan says, that there'll always be scope for hiring very talented people, both on the skill and the capability set, folks who are willing to be agile and learn in environments, particularly like ours, which can be challenging constantly and needing you to evolve. There's always scope to hire folks like that. And we're always looking, despite, whatever pauses we take or whatever, cautious approaches we take to hire, we're always looking for folks like that who can be part of our system. But having said that, I think what happened was, over last year and even earlier this year, you did see a frenzy of just adding folks to your teams, right? And to be able to just hire a lot more with lesser, what would I say? What's the right kind of word? With lesser cautiousness to, saying, what really and how will this role grow in another 18 months? What is the real requirement for this role at this point? So we were slightly a little more, flexible on those hiring fronts, which I think those have sort of, been a little more restrictive now, thinking through hiring strategies a lot more, thinking cautiously. I think it also comes with a little bit of maturity as an organization grows. And I think that's also happening alongside. So from our perspective, I think we would see this kind of approach for the long term now. not only for like because of external environments or markets or anything like that, but I think it comes with, the maturity of the organization and how we want to look at a long-term view of growing sustainably. So more from that perspective, I think sometimes just the external market influences you to do it sooner than later, but that's how we see this growing at this point in time. And that's from an ecosystem chatter perspective, at least from an early stage company perspective, that's how we are having conversations with others as well. And that's how we see them approaching these decisions as well.
Perfect. Geetanjali, thank you. I think then now I can actually pivot to the person I would like to actually talk about, who heads a company which is not new age in any way. Rustomji is a part of the foundation of this country and has been for a very long time. And Mahesh, because you come with the body of work, having had, having managed people function for a few decades and have seen the evolution of people practice itself in India at large, I would like to understand from you as to what do you think the market is? I'm sure you've seen a dip earlier, you've seen the 2008 crash, you've seen, all of this before. So what is, from having that, backdrop, what is your opinion about what is happening currently and where we are heading to?
Right, Sowmya. I heard a lot of English that said I'm the oldest in the panel. But are you able to hear me? Sorry, am I audible now?
We need to increase your volume a little bit, Mahesh.
Okay,
Otherwise,
okay. Is this better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. So I was saying, thanks that the most of the English that you spoke made me feel that I'm the oldest in the panel for sure. So, but as a company, we are definitely new age still, are in the brick and mortar business. But I must tell you, our listing apart, I think really I concur with both Narayan and Geetanjali that at all stages, talent market will always be open for quality talent and skill and competencies, and there will always be room. But if I look at it slightly differently in the post-COVID environment, how we have bounced back, there are 2-3 things which come to my mind very clearly. One, there is a significant sectoral play. So there are sectors where the growth is phenomenal. There are sectors which are in demand, and so definitely there's a lot of hiring. In fact, at most such forums, I get tempted to say that we are not getting people. We are looking for people, we are not getting people. I mean, as we speak, we have put on LinkedIn maybe 40-50 opportunities, and we are looking for people with specified skill sets, but in functions where it's very difficult to get talent. So somewhere amidst all the recessionary talks or the news that of layoffs, etc., I, both in the heart as well as in the intellect, I feel India is shining. And I think we have room and we will always have opportunities. Coming to the real estate sector, the sector that I represent, and yes, to that extent, we've been there for long. It's the 3rd decade in a way. The number of project launches that are happening, the activity in the sector is huge and tremendous. So there is definitely a lot of opportunity. One data point, which is the very basic, may not be very relevant to some of the folks on the forum, but the fact is every month there is a subscription or membership number of the PFs that gets published. I was happy to see a 9% uptick in the last number that came in. It was about 8-9% increase. So I somewhere feel that 23 will have opportunities, especially in India. While I heard that there was good news from Narayan that even Europe and other places also there is definitely a lot of opportunity, but especially in India, I feel there will be room.
Thank you, Mahesh, sir. I think coming from the 3 of you, it must be elevating fears, at least to some extent, to most of the people attending this particular webinar, that, you do see hope and, things actually stabilizing quite a bit by next year. Then I think it is important to actually ask one very important question. 2021, 2020, in fact, became the start of a new way of working. Most of us went remote for a while, and 2022 has been an experiment in hybrid working. it was defined as the make or break job requirement for job seekers and employees in 2022. There are people who resigned, turned down job offers, demanded higher salaries if they weren't actually offered the flexibility that they crave to be able to, work from the office or work from home or go remote. In the context of what we are speaking about, what will the hybrid market strategy, or what is the future of the hybrid market strategy in 2023? Geetanjali, I think I will start with you.
It'd be difficult for me to comment on the strategy per se, but I can tell you from a Dunzo perspective how we are thinking about it, right? I think what COVID made us do was to reevaluate everything we thought that was, almost taken for granted, to say this too you have to do, right? And one of that was to just assume everyone had to come to work, right? But having looked at that and reevaluated, when you go a little deeper, you realize that you start asking questions of what kind of policies, particularly coming to office policies, impact which sort of teams. We are extremely, actually, as a company, very, very diverse in terms of having multiple job families, different types of talent pools in the company. And we are also a heavy operations business, and operations businesses are very fairly hands-on. Right, so you have to be located at a particular place, you have to be located at a store or a warehouse, etc. So when we started looking a little more deeper into it, we realized that if we had to, and this was also a time where every 6 months everyone was announcing like, oh, permanent work from home, and then everyone's like, oh my god, everyone's announcing permanent work from home, why aren't you announcing permanent work from home? And then suddenly it's like a lot of companies are asking people to come back to office after a certain period of time. So then the questions again come from different people saying, why aren't you asking people to come back to office now? So there's all of these movements were happening. For us to be able to take a decision in the long term, we said, let's look at what works for us, right? What works for people who are part of the Dunzo journey? What are their lived experiences, so that we can take a decision in the long term, not just influenced by what's happening outside, but what works well for this talent pool. When we went down and did that, we realized that maybe having one policy anymore doesn't work at an org level as well. We will have to provide for different, experiences across different teams based on what their functions and roles were. And maybe we will have a policy that accounts for this difference. And so we've retained a hybrid policy. We don't think we would want to change it in the near term, even in the medium term. It's working well so far. It actually allows for us to tap different talent pools. We've always been worried about certain things like diversity in our talent pool, which hybrid work allows for you to now include. But it's difficult at times where you need to answer questions as to why some teams are on ground and at work and some teams aren't. So you have to balance those things. So I could say, to answer your question, Sowmya, from at least a Dunzo perspective, we believe that the hybrid model is what will work for in the short to medium term. I can't comment on the long term anymore. If anything from the last 2 years has taught us, I think it would be a little early to say what we can do in the long term. But I think a hybrid model works well for us now, and that's what we're envisaging as well.
Okay, I will then pivot to the other end of the spectrum. Mahesh, I would like to get your opinion about this.
So I think very well said, as Geetanjali said.
Mahesh, I'm really sorry to be doing this, but your volume.
Oh, is this? I'm so sorry about it. Is this better now?
Yes, thank you.
No, but I'm feeling very good in this forum. For a change, otherwise I always get comments that I'm too loud. So for a change, I'm liking this, but it may not be very enjoyable for the audience. So my apologies. I hope I'm audible now. The point I wanted to make was that there is one thing which has emerged very well through the hybrid, the semi, and the full time. Our sector worked throughout COVID thanks to being in real estate, and we had situations like what is called monsoon working at our projects, etc. And most of our projects were full time up and running. With, of course, labor camps well within, construction workers well within our sites, so that they were not at risk at all. But the one piece which comes to my mind has become very, very significant post this entire phenomena is that choices are at play. So when I say choices are at play, because a lot has changed. People want to choose a job today depending upon their family life, where the parents are, where their work-life balance would be the maximum. But within the same play, you also find people who are ready to do anything. So the amount of flexibility that we are expecting organizations to demonstrate in order to provide you with the hybrid working or flexi hours, etc., etc. The same amount of flexibility is what is working wonders to the job seekers. I mean, just to give you an example, I recently hired someone for Virar in Mumbai, and the guy came all the way from West Bengal. He had never seen Mumbai. He was very apprehensive, but then he took that call. So, and which is generally in post-COVID world, shifting that completely diametrical or contrarian to your locations has been slightly difficult. So I feel it will be all about how flexible you are now in the new place, as the organizations are as well.
Fantastic. Narayan, I would like to, to build up on what Geetanjali and Mahesh have been speaking about. I would like to actually hear your inputs about what your thoughts are about this.
Like Geetanjali and Mahesh articulated beautifully well. It's a place of hybrid. Now, hybrid, I would add another interesting complementing feature to it is when I say hybrid, local or hybrid global. Coming from the technology and then from the world of investing, I clearly see. I can give you examples of organizations where in the last 2 years I've said, you know what, I do not want to hire anyone. And I want to add this something which I want to acknowledge here in all honesty and reality, because is that they said, you know what, there's too much of fuss for me to hire engineers in India. And then because the salaries were growing at 200%, 300%, I'm going to go to Eastern Europe. I'm going to get great talent there. And then I'm going to have my base in India and then build the organization. And I've seen how the company's evolved. Now, the reason why I gave this example largely is because earlier it's like demand and supply. Wherever there's a great supply of talent, we're going to execute well professionally with less maintenance and less hassles. Companies are going to pivot and move in that direction. And this is something which I want to tell in all honesty for professionals who are on this panel. If Indian employees become high maintenance, trust me, businesses are quite savvy, smarter enough to say, you know what, thank you guys, move. And we've seen this happening in 1997, 98. We were part of bringing back from US to India, and then Ireland, became a high maintenance country, and then every job moved from Ireland to India. And then we've seen some of the movements happening from India to Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. Now we've seen the trend happening. So at the end of it, it's always going to be an employee's market, and companies are going to be quite smarter to find out where they're going to get value out of it. So hybrid is probably one transitional phase which we are going in. I am of the belief in complementing what Geetanjali and Rustam, what Mahesh have said. I think the cat is still not out yet. How things are going to transform in the next 12 to 18 months. Wait for it. It's going to be much more powerful than what we expect, because it's going to be a totally capable suppliers market who are capable of delivering value.
I completely agree with you, and this might not be necessarily appetizing for everyone who is, having this conversation. But true, India became the, the backup for Ireland when it came to, the whole call center was, for most global businesses, the call center was Ireland, and they became high maintenance and India took over. Apparently, and this is not going to be palatable to everybody, the fact that we have refused to be the sweatshop of the world is actually making India lose business to Bangladesh. Most, Gap and other sweatshirts these days say made in Bangladesh. They don't say made in India anymore. It's primarily because of that, because apparently for them, Indians have become more expensive. So, this is going to follow through. This is going to be a pivot question. I can already see our attendees, submitting their questions. Thank you very much. We would also appreciate if you could leave your email addresses in the question, just in case we are not able to get to it, or if the question is not something that we would like to have you someone address on an open forum. Our attendees will actually write back to you. So we've already started getting the questions, but one question I've already got parallelly, and weirdly enough, I got it on the phone. So I think I will actually try asking you this, because I think it adds more flavor to what is being discussed. in terms of the hybrid thing. Earlier, for the past, like 2020 March, companies experimented with this new thing about going remote. We had not experienced it earlier. Coming from the financial industry, I have never experienced it. You work in the organization because we have, security and money. So you always come to the office. But we were forced into a new way of working. We had to learn to manage our teams, manage our organizations, and manage ourselves and our sanity in a complete remote way. Enough data was not available to see how people progressed in the system, or how their career progression was affecting. There is a very big article that came out on the website that says that hybrid remote working is actually affecting the career progression. And after 3 cycles, because in March we will complete 3 cycles of having worked remotely, that people who are choosing to consistently only work at home and not be at the office are not being offered promotions or are not growing. 3 years is a long enough window to actually support that data. Maybe in a 1-year window, that data was not sufficient. All of you, it's open to all of you, and whoever would like to take this on, how much merit does this hold? Because it is supported by data, and it was actually done by quite a good publishing house. I will leave it to you. Anyone can take it up.
So, Sowmya, I'll at least share with you from what we noticed at Rustamji. While we were definitely not a technology play which ever went on a full-time work from home. So for us, work from home were only minimalistic teams which work from home. And we had those options available to a few roles. But I don't think for us it mattered in terms of any kind of penalization by virtue of the choices of work from home. I think we've been fair to the outcomes, and work from home has actually thrown up that outcomes is the most important thing in the end of it all, as a very clear signal. So at least at Rustamji, I can say for sure, and nor did I hear it in any of the forums with our fellow folks in real estate or some of the other. That's my take on this. I just thought I'll jump the gun, as you said.
Perfect. I would appreciate you, taking the question head on. Narayan, I would like to actually also get your thoughts on it. I know this is an additional question, but I would like to get your thoughts on it because you have employees on 2 different continents. So I think you've also seen supporting data along these lines, right? I know that it comes with merit, because it was supported by quite a lot of companies, and unfortunately, companies in India were not listed as people who, agreed to be a part of this. Most of the respondents belong to American companies and who were working in the US.
Right. So this has been an interesting, I would say, an opportunity for all of us to go back and look in-house. In that context, let me divide the problem into 3 statements. One, people perform 3 kinds of role with glorified titles, whatever it could be of a task, transactional, tactical, and strategic. We can glorify them, with our own philosophy of 7 levels, 9 levels, or 10 levels. But, people perform these 3 roles. Transactional, who just moving things based on instruction. Tactical, with a semi-quasi interpretation of data from their respective managers. And strategic, largely forming short-term to medium to long-term goals. These are 3 types of roles, which humans perform in any organization. Right? In these 3 contexts, if you go back and look at it, the transactional, yes, there's a large volume of people, who are trying to move the mountains, because, this sheer execution force. There, we see the hybrid or working from home really not having as much impact, because the cognitive ability is largely lower there, because at the end of it, they're just moving mountains, because there's a sheer force. And if you go back and look at in any organization, the sheer force of transactional workforce is probably 50 to 60% of them. That means, your individual contributor 1, 2, 3, and 4, they are the ones, who are largely the mass workforce of people. So that's the first part. Now, coming back to the tactical piece and the above, where the cognitive ability of sensing, negotiating, influencing are some of these attributes which are critical for any human to become successful as a leader. Now, that is where there are going to be gaps, because at the end of it, this is my observation, where I have always said Zoom can be used for execution, but not for development. Zoom can be used for communicating a task, but not to be used for drawing board for innovation. So hence, in that particular context, the cognitive ability of debating, agree to disagree, and having your emotions thrown out. If you're not at that phase of learning and growing, I don't think learning really happens for growth. So hence, in that context, promotions can happen where at the lower value chain of the organization or the individual contributor level. But as and when you move up the value chain of moving from tactical role towards strategic role, I still believe there is going to be a deficiency of capability from what the organization expected, what the reality of the market, and what you're performing. While internally, if I look back, that might be he or she might be one capable person, on the ground, performing that role. But if I compare that with the outside market, I think there's going to be a huge gap of capability that is available outside. So in that context, I would divide it into three palettes. Transactional, you'll see promotions. Tactical, semi, but I think the leadership side, there's going to be a vacuum that's going to be created because the cognitive ability is going to be much diminished for someone working from home.
I think that allows me to pivot to a very, very important question. And Geetanjali, I think I would like to get your inputs about it, which brings us to our third question. Geetanjali, I'm parking this question first to you, primarily because of a very unique thing. You are at the helm of Dunzo, and I know Dunzo just went through an expansion of mythical proportions, and during the COVID years. So you would have actually encountered this challenge quite a bit. We all understand that the candidate experience and the onboarding journey are some of the most crucial steps in the journey of an employee while they join a new organization. A long hiring process, from initial screening to an interview process to a job acceptance, especially in the backdrop of very competitive employment market, having several assessment rounds is actually against the norm, apparently, of what a lot of organizations are looking at. I remember when I came into the job market, it was a common thing for us to be told things like, you have 5 rounds of interviews and things like that. There is a lot of adaptation that has happened, especially in the backdrop of companies suddenly having to, scale up their hiring processes. What are the conscious efforts, according to you, that can be done at an organizational level to ensure a world-class recruitment and onboarding experience?
So it's interesting because it is a problem that we've evaluated, we've been concerned about, and we continue to sort of try and see how we can evolve that process, because we have taken this decision to say we'll remain hybrid, right? So there are some roles that will remain remote. So how do you work best in terms of making sure that you retain candidate experience, you get them involved, and also understand the culture of the organization at very early days? The one thing we realized very early on came in from saying that you'll have to invest in tools. Unfortunately, there is not one tool that can help you drive this entire experience, because communication channels need to be a lot more streamlined. Yes, tools do not replace face-to-face communication. It doesn't replace coming into an office and experiencing what the environment looks like. But how do you make sure communication is streamlined? It's happening at regular intervals. All the information that you want, new candidates or new joiners to know are provided to them. So we did, we actually spent about 6 to 9 months testing different things, scouting the market. And it was also a time, I think, where, the HR, the HR IT market sort of boomed, right? Like you had a lot of companies coming out with different tools that one could use. So we looked at evaluating different forms of these tools that we could use as part of our process, streamlined it a little more, had to train internal teams, the internal HR team as well, to say, how do you use these tools effectively to communicate to candidates outside. So that was very critical one in terms of making sure that we did that. 2, I don't think there is a benchmark in terms of saying that, you will do X number of interviews. It doesn't work that way, right? It can probably work that way if you're looking at, like what, Narayan said, very transactional roles, maybe, at possibly lower bands where your, testing parameters are fairly limited. So you can then just streamline it. But as you grow to, tactical or strategic roles, it depends on the role. It depends on the job function. It depends on what you're looking for. And many times these roles also involve saying, I want to do a bar raiser round. I want to do a culture fit round. I want to do a culture fit round number 2 as well, because, this person has great ideas, but somehow something didn't work well with me in that conversation. Can I get a second opinion? And it's fine. Like, I think it's okay for an organization to say that, I want to do one more conversation, right? And I think what is important though in that is communicating honestly to your candidates to say that we think we should be able to do this in 4 rounds. We think we should be able to do this in 5 conversations or even 3 conversations, but we might want to do one more. And so just being honest and communicating to the candidate upfront and walking them through that process, I think that is critical. That gives them a window also into the organization that you are and the kind of communication that you want to have with your team members. So that's how we've looked at evolving this. From more a tactical thing, we do ask our hiring managers to set the process up front, to talk about the number of rounds. The recruitment team does evaluate, go deeply, saying, why do you need 4 rounds? Why can't you do it in 3? So you have those deeper conversations. But once we align saying this is how it is, then that's how we'd like to progress and work forward. So we don't have set rules saying it has to be only X number of rounds. And if candidates aren't interested up front saying, oh, I think this is too many rounds, then maybe we've just decided Dunzo is not the place for them.
Perfect. Thanks, Geetanjali. Narayan, I think I will pivot to you. And building on what Geetanjali is telling, I would also like to additionally ask, is there a difference in the recruitment practice per se in India and the US market, considering you're an organization that's scaled in both geographies?
I think the important part for us to understand is there are different flavors of organization. There are quantifiable assessments, there are qualitative assessments. And then if you go back and look at someone who's being hired for, let's say, sales or in GTM functions, or probably in marketing, or even in people success. Now, they're largely, if you go back and see, it's more largely defined by the qualitative part of their ability to tell a story, their ability to really define value and things like that. Whereas if you go back and look at some of the other quantitative attribute of hiring, which is largely on the engineering side, there you can go back and really pose a quantitative statement, which is as equal to, this is a story which I heard from an engineer to solving a Pythagoras theorem, in an interview, right? Now in that context, there's no one rule which fits all. So hence, the important part is to really understand and acknowledge that where you are hiring and what you are hiring. If you're hiring for GTM functions, then you become more qualitative and really understand the ability of the tenacity, resilience, and going back and hiring at the engineering phase, which is going to be more quantitative, because their ability is to write code, bring in analytics and things like that, so on and so forth. So hence, very hard to go back and say 1 round of conversation, 2 rounds of conversation. And to being more humorous on this round, where 41 attendees are there, and this is something which I want to tell in all honesty. If the engineering is if the founder is an engineer by heart, then he's going to try to quantify everything up to the T, and then and I've seen that. So that probably would work for the first 1 year or 2 years, but after some point in time, you'll realize that that you can't engineer human beings to the T. So you'll have to at some point in time let go. And I know this is just to bring some smiles. I do understand, this is a serious conversation, but you can't quantify hiring
this
into
is
one round.
Incredibly relevant. Pardon my manners, but this is incredibly relevant, Narayan, because I would not like to say names, but I have been at a table where I have actually had a people function professional whom I respect quite a bit, try to explain to the founder of the organization why he cannot finish a 2-round recruitment cycle. Because the founder was like, I need 300 more engineers in 2 months' time. 2 rounds of interview, khatam karo. Like the word was khatam karo. So this is fantastic and very, very relevant. So even someone who's not in the HR spectrum, even, I have heard about this. So I think it is something that will resonate quite a bit with all the HR professionals who are listening to you.
Yeah, I hope I don't get beaten up by this founder. That's okay. Because there's some reality. You can't run away from it.
No, it brought on smiles too. Wonderful. So in the context of this, Mahesh sir, I know there's a lot of things that is being addressed in terms of the recruitment practice. I'll actually pivot to you and ask you about something which is probably one of the most controversial and polarizing topics that professionals have come across in a very long time. And I'll start by asking you about the forbidden topic of moonlighting. A Business Today poll found a sizable 44% of the respondents to their poll saying that they don't consider moonlighting to be cheating, whereas 30% of the respondents to that particular poll felt that it depends on the legal contract that they have with their employer. We are, of course, talking about recruitment of employees. They have multiple requirements right now: hybrid working function, they want a pay parity. And now there is an additional parameter where they are actually moonlighting. I would, of course, definitely want your thoughts about it, and we will kick off this question with you.
Audible? Okay, great. So I think while I'll definitely come to this very fresh, controversial area of discussion almost everywhere, I wanted to add a couple of things to the conversation we just had on the number of rounds. I had something which I thought I may like to add. Is it audible?
Yeah,
Yes,
Mahesh, it's audible.
Great. Sorry, I have to check it again and again because of the device I'm using. Probably they've added a new device to my machine. Okay, so I wanted to just say, while and I think very well captured already in terms of there's nothing called number of rounds, and Geetanjali very rightly said it's all about how you communicate. I wanted to add one thing because I think there are a lot of HR folks in this forum. So one more thing is it's not, apart from communication, I think quite a few rounds can actually be cut if there is ample due diligence done by HR. If the pre-work is phenomenally done well, it is done with a lot of due diligence, it can cut down a lot of unwarranted rounds with respect to, because many a time it happens that you get to know at the second or third round something which is a surprise, which could have actually been highlighted at the screening stage. Honestly, it's a very basic thing, but I feel like getting tempted to say this, that this is one area I keep telling the team that, this should not even have reached the second round, or this should not have even gone to that level where, you would have lost a lot of time in terms of senior folks getting into it. But that is one piece which I thought I'll add to the communication bit. At Rustomji, we have made it mandatory to have each interview to be at least a skip level. So I sense that brings in a lot of ownership. It's not about that you get to know more about the candidate, but at the same time you also align people onto the candidature of a person. The third piece I want to say is that it also depends upon how uniquely different are these rounds. Are they repetitive in nature, or are they uniquely different? Because they're meeting cross-cultural, cross-functional leaders, and then they get a much better perspective and understanding of the organization. So to that extent, I actually want to put it in the favor of the candidate that, listen, the more the rounds, the better for you. You are getting to know more leaders of the organization. You are getting to know much more about the organization in advance. And it's a two-way process. It's not just one way. So sometimes candidates are also in fact, if some interview happens very quickly and just in one round, candidates are skeptical. They call up, yeah, is it okay? Is all well? I mean, are you sure you're making me an offer? You get me? So I think this world is wired very differently when it comes to these subjects of number of rounds. So that is what I just thought I'll add to the thread we had. I hope I'm not crossing the timeline.
Absolutely not, Mahesh sir. Thank you very much. We are also parallelly getting questions. Weirdly enough, the question has come on a different page. That is what one of my team was telling about. Would request you to please have your questions parked in this forum itself. There is a Q&A. There is also a poll that has just come in about your thought about moonlighting. The attendees can, of course, please vote there. Parallelly, if you have specific questions, please park it in the Q&A and not on the chat, because some of the questions are coming up on chat. Okay, Mahesh sir, I will, of course, now ask you to address the big
coming on to the moonlighting. I think my personal view is that it's very contextual. Okay, why it is contextual is that, and I may tend to agree with those 44% who said it's not cheating. as long as it is pre-agreed with the respective management. Okay, now where I am coming from, I come from a business where a lot of organizations were promoter driven traditionally, and they were not sort of large format multinational organizations where you are CEO driven, policies driven, only paper driven. When you are promoter driven or relatively family managed businesses, traditionally how it used to be, there were a lot of things which were okay because they had the in principle agreement, with the management of being able to do this and do that apart from your job, as long as what I said just before, outcomes are not affected, as long as there is no conflict of interest, as long as it is not your mind share which is affecting your business on the other side. But definitely in the current scenario, it has to be it has to be a policy, because it cannot be open for one just because you were closer to a promoter and somebody else is not able to do that. A lot of it obviously came up once the work from home phenomena happened. Then naturally more vistas opened and people could think about it. So to me, I think the views that Infosys threw up, saying that they are okay with it, and in fact there are not many organizations which are okay with it in a public domain, and they are saying that we are fine with it as long as it is well within the guidelines that they define for their workforce. What interestingly I was thinking and trying to possibly coin day before was not moonlighting, it was actually torch lighting. So is where I figured out that the problem is not the moonlighting so much, because at least the person comes and talks to you and has a heart to talk to you, and you can take a conscious call, allow, not allow, uniform policy, etc. But there are people who today have not been relieved at one place, they go join another place, have a short torch viewing of the place, torch lighting of the place, and then they go back and get retained, etc. is something which is far more dangerous. And I in my joking forums, I always call that as torch lighting, which is more bothersome than moonlighting. Not to make light of the subject at hand, I would want my fellow colleagues to talk about it more, but I shared with you. But we did have for a long time a few people who would be allowed, and they would be continuing with this without any effect on the business. And as a management, we were fairly okay with it, as long as it's an informed call, as long as there is a context to it.
So then technically you fall into the 30%, which says that it depends on the contract with the organization. Okay, Geetanjali, I think I will, now that we've got context from Mahesh, I will bring this question to you, primarily because, interestingly, along with being the people function head at Dunzo, you are also the legal head of Dunzo. So there is a legality also to this particular question, which is also what a lot of organizations are talking about. They just think it is not fair practice. So I will, of course, want your thoughts about this.
Contracts are a representation of organization philosophies. If your organization philosophy changes and wants to allow for this, you can amend your contract. So I would say, I think it's important for companies to take a stance, right? What is your position? Where do you believe? Because a lot of moonlighting as a word sometimes can have a negative connotation. So there is a certain ethicality, associated with how you think of moonlighting. From our perspective, I think we've just moved in terms of everybody wanting to have multiple interests. I think life has changed so much. Nobody's more interested now. I mean, very few times you see people wanting to do the same job over 30 years in the same organization. You want to do different things. You want to experience different things. And in some situations, you might also think you might also have the capability of earning, while doing multiple things. Like today, somebody could be a full-time lawyer at Dunzo and then also be an Instagram influencer over the weekend and, be earning. It has nothing to do with, as long as you're not compromising value for the company, right? There are certain hard-coded rules, like you're not working with competition, you're not using company resources, you're not compromising company data, you're not targeting company customers for your social media influence and stuff like that. There are ground rules, yes. As long as you meet those ground rules, you're not compromising value for your company. And when you are, a Dunzo team member, you're 120% there, right? As long as you can meet those norms, it doesn't matter. Pay your taxes beyond that if you're earning from multiple sources, right? So I definitely think it's about saying, encourage transparency and communication. I definitely agree with Mahesh sir on that. Make sure people are bringing it up. The moment you put an embargo without understanding the realities of today, where people have multiple interests and multiple avenues, right? The moment you make it an absolute restriction, you are also stopping conversation about it. So create structures and processes so that people bring this up to you. You can have a conversation, create a system and a process that enables people to do this, right? In fact, from my own example, I can tell you many times I say, today I feel like a much more impactful lawyer because I've looked at the HR side and vice versa, right? So if people are having a broader horizon or an experience, who knows, it could actually end up adding value to your organization. So I very strongly believe that as long as you can create processes and systems that allow for people to engage with it in a manner that is acceptable and not compromising value for the company, it should be okay. And your documentation can reflect that. Agreements are nothing but contracts between two people. So as long as you agree to it and you have the guardrails, I think it should be absolutely fine, actually.
Geetanjali, thank you. That was an incredibly layered and nuanced response. And I'm very grateful you brought on a very important point. So this whole conversation that blew up was because an organization let go of 400 people last year. And then in a public forum, another eminent person spoke about it, and that company followed up with laying off 300 people. But the backdrop of it was the single largest reason why they let those employees go on the basis of moonlighting was because they were using their office resource to be able to code for another company. And a simple tracking device on a company issue laptop let them know that you were working in two different places and you were using company property to do that, which then violated the norms of an organization. And that was what they used as grounds for it. Thank you very much.
So like I said, it's about, company philosophies, right? Like everybody can take a different approach. But yes, if you're using company resources, just a legal nuance over there. And if anyone's watched Silicon Valley, you will know if you use company resources to create any other IP, it becomes your company's IP and they can get claim on it, right? So, it's also in both interest that you don't use company resources. But again, different philosophies, everybody thinks differently about it. Communicate to your teams on what your philosophy is, set context, set processes if you think that you want to, encourage or not encourage it, whichever way it goes. But yeah, I think,
Perfect.
Even from a legal perspective.
Thank you. That was an incredibly, it had so many layers. So, it allows us also to process things in a better way. Narayan, I would like to hear your thoughts about it, because this is something that is evolving. That's an evolving conversation that's now going to go in all directions. Not like the earlier contract where we say, true, I have a 9 to 5 job, which technically is not true. We all have 9 to 7, 9 to 8 jobs. Especially with colleagues at different locations, the day stretches farther. So in the context of that, earlier people would say, I have an 8-hour working thing. So what I do with the rest of my 16 hours, an organization does not have any say in that, which is not true. But like what Geetanjali is talking about, that I could be an Instagram influencer on a Saturday, Sunday, and that's an additional stream of income. Or maybe I have agricultural land and I have a huge source of income that comes in from that. But an organization has nothing to do with, as long as I'm not delivering on my, it's not affecting my deliverable on, what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I'm able to actually parallelly create a separate revenue stream, then the organization with whom I have a primary employment should not have a say in that. So that's a technical idea, and it sounds logical. So then where is the conflict?
See, I completely, first of all, acknowledge and concur with what Mahesh and Geetanjali clearly articulated. It's about being fair and doing the right thing. Now here the important part is, what does ethics mean? Ethics is doing things while people are not looking at, doing it the right thing and people are not looking at it. Now that's an important phrase for us to understand, and moonlighting largely is a fine balance between being ethical to yourself and being ethical to the organization. So in that context, going back to what Geetanjali and Mahesh articulated, is about being transparent and creating an opportunity for people to have that conversation within your organization. Now, I in my personal view, I believe when a board member can represent 5 different organizations of a similar stature in a similar organization, why not an employee with similar capabilities perform and then make that extra dollar? And this is largely stems out of the human nature. What do we say? Maslow's law of hierarchy clearly articulates that everyone wants to be successful, everyone wants to make money, everyone wants to be happy. And then, so you can't run away from those factors of a basic ethos of why humans are built the way they are built in. So hence, in this context, if you add a little bit of flavor of ethics, do things, that you believe is right when no one is looking, and that's a very important factor. Complementing that with the right kind of documentation, and the organization creating a right kind of philosophy for people to come back and have an honest conversation and say, hey, you know what, I've got this opportunity, I can create a humongous amount of value there, and then those learning can be switched back, like what Geetanjali articulated. Now, because in the coming era of where there is going to be a diminishing value of capable talent, let's acknowledge that. And then this is something in which we are seeing across different platforms and sectors. And in this era of diminishing capabilities, now there are going to be very few capable people who are going to be available. While the population might be increasing, while the capable people who've been there, done that is going to diminish because the technology is evolving and the industries are evolving and the human era is evolving. So in complementing all of these 3 things, I believe I believe it's important for us to be transparent. And moonlighting, in my mind, is not a wrong word. We should create it as a more positive word and then harness it, because at the end of it, that's the industry we're going to be in. And if you go back and look at even today in India, I can give you some capabilities, user design, user experience, and most companies, which have built the user experience and user design. If you go back and look at the capabilities in India and versus those capabilities in Eastern Europe, and some of the AI, ML, crypto coders, who are deep line coders, the backend coders of all of these. Some of them are available in India, but largely available in some of the other countries, which I said, where they're gig workers. They are paid based by the code. Now, when some of the industries are already moving, I think India is still catching up to it. But if you go back and look at some of the more, I do not want to use the word developed countries, but more other countries, you've seen this happening. I think it's a matter of few years. I think we will catch up, and then we'll be as equal to them in terms of the ability to recognize them.
Perfect. Thanks, Narayan. The results of the poll for the moonlighting question is in. 60% of the respondents say it's just the smartness of employees, and 40% of them say that it is a gap in the process in an organization. So that's the result of the poll. We'll continue on to another thing that, Narayan, while you were talking about this particular topic about moonlighting, and in the end, I heard this word come up in Geetanjali's answer and Mahesh's answer and yours, that at the end of the day, having a transparent conversation with the employee and then creating a space where it is agreed upon that you can have your other sources of revenue, but these are our deliverables, and you'll of course not use our intellectual property or our system, or you will not use the office premises to conduct another business. As long as all of that is agreed upon, then they can do whatever they want. Everybody has a right to enrich their lives, monetarily and otherwise. So they're allowed to do that. So all of that transparency, I think, will help build the one word which was common in all of your answers, which was employee experience, which seems to be a big topic of discussion at the moment. I remember having this conversation with another eminent HR professional, I think 4 or 5 months earlier. And we did focus a lot on the idea of how companies, instead of focusing more on talent attraction, now the focus is more on employee experience. While we were having that conversation, one question that came up was, but how do you measure the effectiveness of all the employee benefit practices that are being rolled out? Over the course of also, I'll further add to this, because there are organizations that were born remote and are operationally remote. There are organizations that are hybrid, and there are organizations that are working in the office space. So in the context of that, all 3 of you have organizations that are being managed in each one of the ways that I'm talking about. How do you then manage the efficacy of the employee engagement initiatives that you are rolling out? Narayan, I'll start.
All right. Now this is a long, lengthy, but bifurcated question. So let me first pick the engagement piece. And And in my understanding and belief, engagement for me largely is all about purpose. Is about the vision of the organization, which actually binds an employee to pick an opportunity. Okay. And I call this as marriage, which means, when you go back and getting married to someone, you look at what's the purpose of this particular human being, and what are you going to get married into. That means I understand the purpose and the vision, and then perfectly align with that. Now, then after that, you go back and look at, the house and then the benefits and things like that. So that's the next step on the benefit side. So the engagement piece for me, like I said, is a purpose. And if you align with the company's vision of what you're going to build, that means the engagement is taken care of. Now, coming back to the next piece of benefits, is it measurable? Is it clearly definable? Yes, it is clearly differentiated and can be measured. Now, the reason why I would say that is specifically if you go back and look at it, every organization, I'm sure that there are a lot of practitioners sitting here, is that when you go back and say, this is my cost and this is the cost of my benefit, and then the cost of benefit, what you're exactly spending. And if you go back and see, how exactly you're going to get value out of it in terms of their productivity. Now, there is something called as ROI Institute. They have clearly defined mechanisms of every investment on every dollar which you spend on an employee, and understand how it could be recovered. There are tools and technologies which can be articulated to identify the amount of investment you're making on an employee and the ROI you're seeking from that particular investment. So there are ways and means of doing it. It's a long, lengthy, defined structural mechanism to get it. But I still believe, to answer your question in two different parts, engagement largely is about purpose, vision, where you're getting connected with that particular purpose and joining them. The benefits is all about what is that the in a marriage, the house, the cars, which you have to make sure that you have the luxuries of life. And I believe, that's the second part of it, which are clearly measurable. I think, Sowmya, you're on mute.
So sorry. Mahesh, I will park this question to you now. This is a topic on which I'm sure everybody wants an answer.
Sure. So, Sowmya, I think Narayan very well articulated that, engagement for all of us, while traditionally had multiple meanings, but I think the larger meaning for all of us has been clarity of thought, clarity of purpose, and alignment of goals largely. And it's, I think a good word Narayan gave us is, or rather a good simile that he gave us is of a marriage where, a purpose is what defines the relationship going forward. So I think somewhere it is important that we all understand this, that, that as employees get aligned to our purpose, they also see their journey in that purpose. And only if they are able to see it, they are able to, build that organization. And that is what adds to your culture. Somewhere I feel, while there are different models, different ways all of us use in terms of measuring the impact of our policies on all employee benefits and everything that we do. One of the most important things is always reaching out. And I think there was someone who must have coined the word pulse surveys, actually picked up the right word called pulse. So as long as you reach out to the pulse, you will know what is working for you, what's not. I may not be able to tell you quantitatively that, okay, by virtue of this change, this policy, this benefit, so many people have got retained, or so many people are working with us only because of this feature. You will not be able to slice it like that. But as long as you are reaching out to everyone there and you are able to feel the pulse, you will be able to measure what's happening. And I very strongly believe that today's world does not like being too straight-jacketed on policies, which essentially means that if there is an exceptional situation, it asks an HR person to rise to the occasion and take care of that situation, even if at the cost of creating an exceptional note or an instance which can be quoted as an exception and which will be liked by the larger mass, and nobody will come and question you, okay, why this happened for X, Y, Z. So I somewhere feel that it's more in the practice than in the quantification, but it has a lot more power in terms of retaining good talent, retaining people, engaging people. I also must tell you, Rustamji is a place where people, I usually joke with people when someone comes, I said, we don't introduce people by their names. I jokingly tell them, okay, meet so-and-so 5 years, meet so-and-so 11 years, 17 years, 18 years, things like that, So it looks a little funny, but it reassures someone that, okay, you joined a place where you may not actually leave. You will love to be here forever. I heard Geetanjali say that, today's world does not want to work 30 years in the same place. But if the same place gives you different shades of every day, you would love to be there for 30 years, maybe, So I think we need to be a lot more thoughtful in how dynamic we are in terms of changing. While, of course, her context was different from a very gig mindset, the new generation mindset, etc. But I'm talking about from an employee experience perspective. If you are aligned to the changing mindsets, the changing needs of the employee, I'm sure there's a lot more that the benefits and employee engagement and benefits can do.
Thanks, Mahesh, sir. Gitanjali, I think I will ask you the devil's advocate question. Should we even be talking about how are we measuring? Maybe that's the finance person in me who wants to know about how to measure everything. But is this a conversation to even be had about how do we go about measure? Like, we've rolled out an employee benefit. We've worked very hard for for a long period of time to actually communicate it to the entire workforce. We have first of all done our due diligence to even see that that is a benefit that we want to roll out to our particular employees. So in the context of this entire thing, is it something we should even be measuring?
So I think, should we be measuring? Sure, we can measure, right? Is there a most accurate way of measuring? We may not have the answer to all of that just yet, right? Because some systems are complex. Also, the way you used to measure something in a work from office model might be different from the way you now measure it. Your expectations of outcomes may be different, right? Simple put in saying, all of us started mental wellness programs during, the pandemic. Now, we get data month on month saying how many people have actually utilized that. And compared to the size of the organization and compared to the size of the investment we're making, maybe usage is very limited or low. Does that mean you stop it then? Right? So you wouldn't, you'd have to take a decision as an organization saying this is important, and therefore we might not always have the number metric to measure it, but you would take a decision on what to do with that data and whether you continue making that investment or not. So I think it's okay to measure or want to measure, but you might not always have the right answers to it. And that shouldn't always fuel your decision on whether you should try it as an organization or not. Because I know all of these conversations do come up in the context of saying, how much budget do I give you for this? And it's not always a straitjacket answer, right? And you're, negotiating this, saying, oh, look, 20 people are using it. Why should we spend so much every month, right? But maybe it's so impactful for those 20 people, and to the organizations want to tell their team members that they care, right? And so you should still go ahead and do it, is my view. So, yes, Sowmya, I think we should measure. But not being able to come to conclusive answers after measuring should not be a reason for us to not do it. I think that's a separate debate and a separate conversation. And that is also worthwhile a conversation to have, apart to a worthwhile exercise of measuring.
I'm sure everybody else who's also attending this conversation is getting an insight to exactly why you head both people function and legal, because the amount of nuance that answer, I thoroughly appreciate it, because it is true. People battling, like companies are considering should they be spending on the mental health of their employees, but we don't have a problem spending on GMC. Only 10% of our employee population is using GMC, but we know it is a critical thing. If something happens to their physical health, they'll have to go. But just because it is only being used by 10% of the population doesn't mean we're not paying employee insurance for all the 100% of employees who work in an organization. But the fact that that conversation is happening when it comes to the mental wellness aspect also, not everybody is reaching their break point. But the fact that there are people who, because we also provide this service, I have seen there are employees on suicide watch. There are people who are caretakers of a very sick child, permanent caretaker of a very sick child and also working from home. There are people who are battling with caring for ailing parents. There are people who have lost parents. We just went through a global pandemic. There are people who have lost their parents, they have lost loved ones, and they've all had to deal with all of this and travel restrictions. So you're actually dealing with the death in the family and you can't travel. So the world has been a very, very difficult place. And the fact that how do you then quantify how much it will affect a mental wellness professional made? Maybe they pull them back from the brink of, a life and death situation. How do we then quantify it? And then should we then consider, should we even roll out that particular benefit? I'm sure there are a lot of other benefit initiatives that organizations have taken. I don't know how many people have been prevented from having spondylitis because companies have sent ergonomic chairs. But the amount of thought that went into selecting the right kind of chair so that their employee can work remotely, but their backs and their necks can be safe, was a thought thing. Now, where is the measurement metric for it? Thank you so much. There was so much nuance in the answer. I'm sure
I just want to add a little bit of a proviso to that, legal language, to say that, it depends on, you can't do that for everything. Like, obviously organizations will have to have budgets and we've got to be reasonable about what we ask for. Right. But I think it helps to identify your philosophy as an organization. What is it that you will say is non-negotiable for me in terms of what I want to do for my team members, and then focus on that. Right. And so I might choose mental wellness over ergonomic chairs because I just feel like that's the most important thing we want to do at an organization level. Right. So I think defining that philosophy helps you make these decisions a little better. But I'll also say it's context. Companies like Dunzo, we do a lot of experiments, we do a lot of A/B testing. We invest in all of that without knowing exactly where my returns are going to come on that, because it's the nature of the organization. It might not be in other cases. So I think, and therefore, if I'm doing that on the business side, I'm okay doing that on the people side as well, because that is the nature of how we do things. So I would just like to paraphrase saying, I speak a little more from my context and the companies that we are at, but it could work differently elsewhere as well.
It is showing up in the answers. There are people leaving, compliments telling you've looked at the entire thing in a very 360-degree manner. So thank you. I just realized other people share when you addressed that, I actually knew that you had seen an angle that we had not seen. Thank you for that. Great. Now that we've actually spoken about how we're actually dealing with so much of it, especially with the hybrid work model, and while talking about employee experience and managing employee experience in the context of people being in their houses or working, people rolling back to the office also is a new challenge. Like they're used to the comfort of home. Now people have to be at work even on limited number of days. So there are a lot of challenges that we are looking at. Technology, I know, has to a large extent ended up in solving a lot of the problems that we had. In the entire HR spectrum, all the way from candidate experience to talent onboarding to operations and payroll and every other part of the entire HR spectrum. I know there is sufficient. It looks like to be able to manage an entire remote workforce, there is a huge dependency on technology. Is there, according to all of you, a space where you find technology has not yet penetrated sufficiently? And parallelly, from being the devil's advocate, I would also like to ask that, is there a particular portion of the HR spectrum where technology has permeated so much that it will actually make that function redundant in terms of having to have a physical resource anymore? In that, Narayan, I think I will address this question to you first.
You're on mute, Narayan.
Narayan, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry.
We broke you.
No, that's fine. Before I give my share my thoughts, let me divide this into multiple facets. One, in my understanding, HR largely means it starts from the organizational culture, talent acquisition, talent management, comp and ben, HR ops. Let's understand the entire gamut of qualitative, quantitative attribute which an HR professional would manage. Now, in this entire value chain, if you go back and see wherever things are quantifiable, let's say the talent acquisition piece, the compensation, and the data management from the HR operations piece, you see a lot of technology penetration, and being in a VC firm, I can be honestly tell this, I'm still looking for an idea where I can say, wow, I found something quite fascinating and interesting. Because largely the ideas which I have seen is coming in from, let's say, the talent acquisition space or from the operation space of aligning and managing data. So in this spectrum, I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovators and founders and ideators to come back to solve multifaceted, qualitative definitions and quantifying it for measurements. There are many different areas of where HR or people success could be penetrated with greater technology and newer ideas. But I still believe in many facets, we are still, like I said, the transactional piece is where you've seen the penetration of ideas, but not in the not in the tactical and the strategic piece of what HR does and how it delivers. I still believe there's a humongous amount of opportunity for the practitioners to get innovated there.
Perfect. So I will actually transition to Mahesh sir on this. Mahesh sir, because you have seen the evolution of HR practice for a considerable amount of time. From a time when attendance registers used to be outside the office and somebody would have to manually collate it every single day, and at the end of that month that sheet would have to go to somebody in payroll and it would have to be managed. Like, there has been so much evolution in the people function space in especially in the last couple of decades. There are from even my eyes, I can see spaces where people are not required to do that job anymore. From that perspective, is there a space where you see is getting redundant because of, is there another new space in the HR spectrum which is getting redundant in terms of a person having been allocated there? Or is there a space where you find technology is not yet permeated and it will never permeate? Like, I'm sure you have an insight about that.
So, Sowmya, I think all of us see technology almost everywhere. I don't know, a day before I was seeing some cartoon or something of a robot serving a pizza somewhere and in the office, etc., etc. I think what it is the DNA of the organization that decides what will affect you and what won't. As an organization, we are, we believe in human values way too strongly, that we would not let technology overtake us on things which we don't want to negotiate. So while we are in real estate and we are into right from the smallest affordable housing segment right up to the super luxury, in some of our projects you can actually go and the mirrors are digital. You can just click the mirror and it will start YouTube for you or Google for you while you are while you may be just shaving or whatever. So I'm saying when I go to forums, I always tell them, I said, our mirrors have gone digital, but we would love to stay human, because the fact is that end of the day, it is the human values which deliver the max. We have been very lucky for two reasons. One, that of course we are not as vast an organization, vast spread. We are very niche play and we are relatively a very small organization in terms of headcount. So we are able to manage it that way. But more important than the number and the being able to do, I feel it is our thoughtfulness. And I think our management has through and through in this journey been very thoughtful and been very people centric. And we continue to be like that. I think Narayan gave a very good slice of, there are areas which can definitely be influenced very positively by technology, and we must. Basic things like HRIS, etc., and all that. We may be even, in fact, even on that side, we've been a little late, being a relatively smaller size and strength, so we were able to manage things much better even without that. But definitely, it has the advantage. But there are so many values which cannot be brought in with any kind of technology app or whatever. I think that interface is beautiful. We would love to keep it like that. So my worry is not on what more can get replaced by technology. My worry is what more can remain human, what more we can have touch and feel. That's what I feel.
Wonderful, Mahesh sir. Thank you so much. If I may be allowed to say so, I share your thoughts about this because I have close to 2 decades worth of experience in sales. And the more digital the world is becoming, I'm actually starting to realize the importance of better quality salespeople, because the idea is emotion, like a human being can never replace human beings, and the inherent need to interact constantly, that and what are we doing even digitally? We are only interacting with each other. So the idea of, the most honest and novel interaction, that deep craving that human beings have, that is the fundamental reason why I don't think technology will fully replace anything. Geetanjali, I would like your views about it. Not only do you sit at the helm of a technology company, you're a complete internet-based company, and also you have, I'm sure, a population that is more technology oriented. So I will definitely, and not only your employees, your customers are also technology oriented. They're only using your organization services via an app. So I would like to hear your point.
So broadly, my view has always been technology is an enabler, right? When you call technology or tools, they're just tools. They help you function better, right? So I think the only question that we've always evaluated, and in the HR space, we're still evaluating it. There isn't a tool I have seen so far that has been bang on, spot on, saying this works for everything, right? So it's still so evolving in that space at this point in time. And I think one of the reasons for that is like what, Mahesh sir and Narayan also said, you cannot replace a person. That's not possible to do, right? But having said that, I think the one question we can always ask ourselves is, when you have more nuanced tools available, when you have more impactful tools available, how can we be better in what we do every day? And how can we create more holistic experiences at the workplace, more engaging experiences? How can we empower our managers and leaders to do better, right? So because you have some of these opportunities now at your hand. So I think some of those functions that can be replaced will be replaced, which are more tactical. But beyond that, I think we have to look at it as really a tool to enable us work better and be more impactful at an organization level.
Perfect. Thanks, Geetanjali. We are now coming to the last question that I will be asking our panelists. And post that, we will be taking the questions that have been submitted by the attendees, and we will address as many as possible. To Atik, I know a lot of people have sent their questions on the chat. So if you can transfer those questions from the chat to the Q&A, then it will be easier for me to probably, immediately address them to our speakers. Okay. I think my final question for the day that we would like to understand from you is how do you future-proof yourself? We are, of course, addressing a huge number of HRs, but the other population that is attending are people, everybody who is in the growth stages of their career. How do you future-proof yourself for 2023, which is an immediate threat? And then there is a larger spectrum of what do you actually then see as a foundational element for you to develop your career for your future. So I think then the question is twofold. Narayan, I would like to start with you.
All right, sure. See, if you have to, like I've been saying, from the beginning of this conversation, it's quite simple. If you're honest about yourself, you're ethical, when we ask a moonlighting question, if you have the right kind of capability and if you're focusing on what you believe is critically important, you are building a future proof. There is no shortcut for life. There's no shortcut for success. Okay. And this is something we have seen time in and time again. Anything, and this is like, and then I had a friend very clearly tell this to me. Life is like a sinusoidal wave. What goes up will have to come down, but you need to be resilient to come up and then be more effective. So hence, in that context, future proofing only happens in being honest to yourself and loving what you like to do. And rest everything, whatever comes, I still believe is profit. So hence, in that context, my two-word submission: be honest to yourself, focus on what you believe in is critical and important, and build capabilities. Build capabilities, which can really harness your future.
Perfect. Thanks, Hati. Mahesh sir, I will want to ask the same question.
So I think while 2023, nothing much will change as the calendar changes in terms of chronology. But yes, contextually, a lot is changed over the period. And so I personally feel there's one thing which comes to my mind very strongly, that people who will have a stronger commitment will definitely have a better play. Now, when I say commitment, it is to not just the organization, it's a commitment to self, commitment to family, and then commitment to the organization. So all three you have to be committed to. So people, I also sense that, end of the day, this entire one sinusoidal wave has also shown us the art of learning to be happy all the time. So people who learn, or people who are able to, learn the art of remaining happy in these tough times, being able to, live through that commitment is an important skill for me. I also feel the second most important skill that will be always in demand 2023 and beyond for sure is agility. A lot is changing at the workplace in terms of multiplicity, in terms of changes, in terms of doubling up roles. So agility will be another very important thing for people to be conscious of. So that's my take on it.
Thanks, Mahesh. Geetanjali, of course, I will have to bring this question to you as to, how do you future-proof yourself in your careers? And more importantly, what does anybody need? Are there any particular skills that are needed to be competitive and thrive in 2023 and beyond?
From a purely skill set perspective, I think the one thing that I have seen across the board, and I feel the need, irrespective of where anybody lies in the spectrum, particularly in a Danzo context where we are hybrid, right, is to sharpen your communication skills, right? To really, really focus on clarity of thought, clarity of communication, to be able to, everybody's patience levels, everybody's interest, everyone's attention has been diminishing over time. How can you still be sharper and impactful, and get your message across? Is very, very critical. So just purely from a skill set perspective, right? How do you do the best on that? Beyond that, I think future proofing, I agree with Mahesh, sir. Like if there's one thing that's been consistent over the last few years has been change. So, how do you constantly stay open to change? How do you stay agile to, more changing environments, both personally, professionally, I think being open from a mindset perspective is very, very critical. And for that, read a lot, listen a lot, actually. I think there's a critical skill set of being able to listen to people a lot more deeply, to be inspired by what you're doing. So these are really, actually, these are more, like competencies or behavioral sort of assets that you could build on. And then anything you can do, like we're all talking about saying, hey, you can do multiple jobs at the same time. So whatever you're doing, do it well and, with an open mindset of, being impactful to people around you. So yeah, that's just what I think. And I don't think it's a 2023 thing. I think it's more, long term.
Thank you so much. I think that brings me to the end of the questions that we had prepared. Now, of course, we will want the questions to, be, we will address questions that have come in from people who are attending. I believe this is more technological. I wouldn't understand, or rather, this is completely dependent on, me not understanding it. There is somebody who has asked, how would HR processes change in the metaverse? I believe this has got something to do with Web 3.0 and all of that. So I will straight away take it to, my last speaker, Geetanjali. I will start with you. HR processes.
Honest answer, I don't know.
Wow.
Right? Because sure. The way I'm thinking through it, though, is I think immediately, though, what will start happening is, people's ability to think more consciously about data protection, privacy, and those sort of norms. I don't know if one would have rules around it and how would we build it. It's still a conversation, at least I can tell you from the legal side of how we are debating policies around these things, which will definitely impact people. Will HR processes evolve because of the metaverse? I'd actually wait and watch a little more to see how that works. I mean, we've just spoken about how tools can't replace people because of a certain sentiment, right? So sure, I mean, as businesses evolve, you will have some processes that do evolve around it. But if it's ultimately people that are running these businesses, even in the metaverse, then I think definitely, it's you're going to see a little bit of what we do already, but maybe in a more, technology friendly manner. I don't know. I'd love to hear if anybody else has views, actually, because I'm also interested. I'm going to Google it quietly.
Fascinating question. Like now you will have to also manage, NFTs and metaverse people also. This is like brilliant. This is a straight out, what do you call it, interesting question. Mahesh sir, I will definitely want your thoughts about this.
No, so I think this is a tough one. So good. Thanks for asking that question. I think
this question has come from Sneha Surana.
Sneha Surana, really a good question. But I would rather want to answer it philosophically by saying that anything which is an HR process is driven by people, be it metaverse or any other, right? So I think and I think Geetanjali rightly said, irrespective of that, it will be certainly people driven. So as people would change, as people would demand, HR processes will always have to change. And I think that is what drives HR processes. There's nothing else called HR process. I always call it's a people process. So if it is to do with people, it's a people process. And so it will be the people who will make you change, nothing else.
Perfect. This is interesting. I think there's quite a bit of research all of us will have to now do, because how do we manage employees on the metaverse? Wow. Okay, great. Narayan, I think Indrakanti has sent in a question which says, and this came in at the time when you were addressing a particular a topic. So Indrakanti asks, with recent layoffs affecting per capita and purchase power of individuals, how well can HRs cater to employee wellness? Because a lot of benefits are now being put on the chopping block considering the contraction in the economy. So Narayan, I will ask you this question.
This is a tough one, largely because I think per capita largely is from the income perspective. That means if I'm earning X amount of dollars, and I'm still going to be earning X, or probably it's going to be reduced to Y. And let's understand the difference between per capita and benefits. And in that context, when my salary gets reduced, that means how will I spend more money on the benefits? It's a valid question. Like I said, it's a reality, and the reason why I would say this is a reality, let's acknowledge something. If a cost of kg of an apple was 100 rupees last week, and today it's gone up to 200 rupees, it largely becomes the matter of its affordability. And business, let's acknowledge, is largely for profit and for not profit. So hence, in that distinction, companies will still further go back and look at what is something which are manageable and what is not, based on the cost and the operating margin, because at the end of it, they are liable to answer to the board and to the stakeholders. So in that context, it's a tough task for HR practitioners and people practitioner to go back and dwell more and identify ways and means to save cost, because you can't reduce the salary because it's going to largely have an impact on the per capita of that particular employee. And one of the chopping block every time, when some of these happen, and we have seen Mahesh, Sowmya, and Geetanjali, all of us have seen multiple cycles of recession in different markets, and we have done it, is largely to go back and look at benefits which are essential and which are non-essential. And some of your luxuries are something which are going to be taken away. Some of the ones which are in need, let's say your health benefit is a need, your dental benefit is a need, and then your life insurance is a need. These are things which are going to stay. And now even I would say mental health, EAP are going to be available, but your gym membership probably are a luxury, and those are the ones which are going to be in chopping blocks. So hence we will have to make that very clear distinction.
Perfect. Thanks, Adi. There is a question I definitely, this bizarrely enough was an entire topic of an entire webinar we had a while ago, and an entire hour and a half worth of conversation still did not answer enough of the questions, because that's when I realized how much of a problem this actually is. I would like all of your inputs on this particular question. Sonu Subedi asks, what is the best way to motivate, retain, and grow Gen Z employees? I know this is a hot topic of many employee HR forums, because we are dealing with a very different population, with very different motivations, with very different, goals, with very different ideas about how to conduct a career. So, Mahesh, I will start this question with you. And I will want all three of your inputs on this question, because I'm sure everyone who's managing a workforce at the moment is employing largely Gen Z professionals, and more of them are coming into the employee workforce. So I would like your answer.
So I thought this one will get better replies from both Geetanjali and Narayan, but I must tell you that the trick of the trade for me is very simple, that as long as you talk their language, adapt yourself to their lifestyles and their thought process, I think you will always be able to retain them and be able to bring about what you need to retain your Gen Z. Changes also have to be agile enough. You have to be agile enough to bring that environment to them and not be very stereotyped and cliched. That's what I would like to comment on.
Thank you, Mahesh sir. Geetanjali, I think as Mahesh sir rightly said, this problem probably more, largely or more prevalently exists in new age companies, especially internet companies. I'll first spark it to Geetanjali, and then Narayan, I'm going to come to you about primarily because one of the biggest things that have been coming up with every conversation we have is how the motivations of the Gen Z workforce itself is different. And by virtue of that expectation, what they are willing to do, they're far more aware of what their rights are, which is a good thing. Everyone should be aware of their rights, which is the reason earlier there have been, gross violations of, employees being, made use of, by putting them through 12, 13, 15 hour work hours that to mandatorily, or working on a Saturday and Sunday and all of those things. Thankfully, they are more aware of what their rights are, but also their boundaries are different, and their, what motivates them is very, very different. Maybe because they come from a backdrop which is more financially stable, like their motivations are different. So what are the challenges? And of course, but technically speaking, as long as they're our employees, we would like them for them to not only grow, but to thrive in our organization. So I'm sure looking at the population of Dunzo, having the largest portion in that age demography, what is your challenge with working with the Gen Z population?
Well, I look at it as a challenge and an opportunity as well. This is, like, you call it the future of work, right? Like, these are the people you're going to see a lot more at your workforce. So I think there are a couple of things that we do, right? One is understand firstly what is it that motivates them? Like, have we gone deeper into talking to them a little more, doing a little bit of all of these, pulse surveys, all of that, getting inputs into what they like, and all of that, right? So from those conversations, from those surveys, what I've been able to understand at least is to say that, one, the purpose of the organization means a lot today. Right? Talking about your purpose, talking about your impact, not just as a for-profit company, but how are you having an ecosystem impact, right? What is your purpose? What is your mission, vision? That has a lot of impact into, why people choose an organization. So being very clear about it, reiterating it, what your values are, is very critical to how they feel, tuned into a particular organization. Second, is the work really motivating them? Right? What kind of work are they engaged in? And do you believe that they've got to do the same work? Like, the one thing that I have found is at least people don't want to do the same job. Even like beyond 6 months, we've seen people saying, okay, can I apply for an IJP? Can I apply for, playing some other role or whatever like that? So whilst you can't always, change your organization stance or create different avenues constantly to keep people interested, I think you can create structures and frameworks to allow for people to remain, excited about what they do, and that could change differently for different people. So, creating structures for internal movements, for, can you stay in one, can you stay in one team but try and intern in another team a bit, get a little bit of a bird's eye view on, how other teams are functioning, what they do, right? And actually at Dunzo, we have a lot of stories where people started at one team and then moved through different teams and are actually doing fairly well, right? Because they've been able to get context, they're upskilling. So then helping them to upskill also, so that then they can move, right? And these things like what we've also spoken about, moonlighting, right? Allowing for them to consume their excitement somewhere else, but within an organizational framework. So, I think it's allowing for us to also, evolve as an organization to understand what people want, just like we as a company need to evolve, looking at what our users and our customers want. Similarly, our team members are also a relevant stakeholder, and we have to look at what motivates them, right? But beyond that, I think it's okay for an organization to also accept that there's a drawing line. This is what we're willing to do. This is how much we're willing to engage. Beyond that, if somebody is still not happy and they want to move on, it's okay, right? Like, I think having your boundaries drawn so that, you still need to look at what is important for a sustainable organization to grow. And I think you also see enough of people, in that Gen Z sort of generation who are motivated, who stay with you and are not always what we think as Gen Z as being loud and sorry to use the word, but fickle. It's not like that. You see a lot of committed folks as well. So you'll have full folks, you'll have people sticking in, staying around as well. So I think it's okay. I think it's been fun, actually. It's been quite a nice learning journey working with a completely different generation.
Geetanjali, thank you for that answer, because it's rare for this to happen, but when you were actually talking about them even exploring opportunities within other departments, because they're at their stage of their career probably, and they're a lot more they seem to be a generation which is a lot more willing to think, willing to accept to themselves, telling that this is not working, I want to try something new. They are, just because they have an engineering degree does not stop them from wanting to try out sales, or maybe even try out HR.
If they have a law degree, also wanting to do HR.
Perfect. So, the idea of, being able to tell maybe the direction in which I want to go to for the rest of my life and call a career, maybe it lies somewhere else, and they give themselves more space to explore. When you said that, not only me, I even saw Mahesh start smiling, and like that immediately resonated. So I'm sure that's also, and somebody also has dropped a message telling the same thing. It was a wonderful answer. Narayan, I would like to hear your terms about it. It's coming to a point where we have more questions that are unfortunately going to be left unanswered than answered. We will have our panelists probably right back to you. Narayan, but what is your opinion about working with the whole Gen Z population?
I think this is a question which we've been answering the last probably a decade or so.
Yeah,
So my
because
simple
a decade ago, I remember how this was
ask is,
framed. It was framed as
all
the
of us
Gen
have
Z
grown
phenomenon.
either as a child or right. So all of us have grown either as a child or as a parent. So I'll bring in my view. There's, in the sense, I've always said Gen Z is like a child, the opportunity to make mistakes and then more, you'll be able to retain them well. If you, because they are
Narayan, unfortunately, we're losing you.
the change today, knowledge is available on the internet. Before you could answer, a kid in the room will have answers for probably 100 such questions, which you're going to ask. So let's acknowledge that first and say,
Aarti, unfortunately, we're losing you.
I'm sorry, the line got disconnected. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay,
Hello?
I don't know where I stopped now, but let me reiterate. Let me start. We've been
You were
asking
telling
this
us
question
about
for the
how
last
this
decade or so. So
generation is definitely stronger, sharper, and faster. That they have no problem voicing their opinions, and they are definitely a very talented bunch of people.
correct.
So we're talking about that, and you were telling that we have to acknowledge that. So I
We
think
have
that's
to
completely lost here.
acknowledge that, and then once you start acknowledging that, the way you're going to manage, I don't think you can manage them. You can nurture them, because gone are the eras of managing. Because in the era of manufacturing where you have to manage numbers of production, manage non-knowledge workers. But today, everyone is a knowledge worker. Even if you go back and talk to an Ola and Uber driver, and he's got much better knowledge of where he's going to make more money, for his living than compared to what many others could do. That's what knowledge, gives them, and that's the power of internet. So hence, in this context, we need to nurture them, and nurture is largely parenting. It's not managing. So if you have the ability to, I've always said this, if you have the ability to open up, even encourage them, create a safety net for them. I think, not Gen Z, I think the next couple of generation will be easy to manage because they are a knowledge powerhouse. They're much more smarter than you.
Perfect. On that note, I think it's time for me. Unfortunately, this is a great opportunity for me to say about the quality of what is going on, that I have 9 unanswered questions. There are questions that are coming in which are nuanced. There are people who are talking about how to actually approach layoffs. There are people who are asking about employee retention strategy. There are people who are asking about culture eat strategy for breakfast. So people are talking about culture. There are so many nuanced questions that are coming in, and I really wish we could have more of a conversation with all of you and get your thoughts. But Geetanjali, Mahesh sir, and Narayan, I have already gotten pings from your respective secretaries and offices telling that you all have calendars that start at 6 p.m. So in the constraint of time, first and foremost, the fact that you have given 2 hours of your time for this conversation is something that I am going to be incredibly grateful for more than anything else. Personally, for me, I think I have come away a richer person at the end of 2 hours. A mentor of mine consistently keeps telling that the most generous thing a person can be at a particular age is with their knowledge, because it not only enriches someone else, it prevents them from making mistakes and walking into pitfalls that somebody else already has experienced. So thank you for being so generous with your knowledge. Thank you for having given us insights that have been born out of your rich experiences. I have come away richer at the end of 2 hours. I am sure it has enriched not only the knowledge levels, but also the careers of everyone who attended. I am truly grateful.
Sowmya, just will take 10 seconds to really appreciate the quality of questions and the quality of audience we had here. I think we all take away something from each such forum, and I think there was a lot to learn from even the questions. So there are, when the questions are thought-provoking, we all start reflecting and we go back and also rework. An amazing learning. Thank you very much for putting this up. Yeah.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.